If you're hopeful the Bills can find a speed wide receiver in the middle rounds, then this episode is for you.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino. On today's episode, we're continuing our work in creating the Bills 2026 NFL Draft Board, and we're talking more wide receivers. We recently covered 7 wide receivers. We're going to cover 7 more today. There's 7 more coming. So if we haven't covered a guy that you're hopeful that we cover, it's probably coming on the next wide receiver episode. And again, this is not necessarily my top 7. It's a mix of guys that the Bills could target throughout the early-ish rounds, kind of rounds 1 through 5, and we'll talk about different options at each position. And today's going to feature a lot of guys that offer speed, and I think we can all agree that the Bills can use some speed and some verticality, and so a lot of the receivers we discussed today will provide that. A quick reminder on the need at wide receiver. I think obviously the acquisition of DJ Moore is a big one and eases the need at wide receiver, but ultimately the Bills are probably going to roster 6. And when you look at DJ Moore, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Josh Palmer, that's probably 4 of your 6. And then it's this group of Trent Sherfield, Steven Gosnell, Jalen Virgil, and McCole Hardman. And right now, 2 of those are going to make this roster. And so that should scream need at wide receiver, even if it isn't the most pressing. And there's also this other variable where the Bills just haven't invested in the draft enough at wide receiver, and it's put them in this position where they're continuously having to add veterans, whether that's through trades or signing mid-level veterans to contracts they can't live up to, and it's created a bit of a funk, and the cupboard needs to be stocked full of players that have some cost control with some upside. How do you get those? You draft them. And so we're going to talk about different players that the Bills can draft at receiver today. Again, a lot of these players will offer speed. All right, let's start with Omar Cooper from Indiana. 6 foot, 199 pounds, 30 and a quarter inch arms, 9 5/8 on the hand size, relative athleticism score of an 8.84 out of 10. In 2025, Omar Cooper had 69 catches for 937 yards and 13 touchdowns. His average depth of target was 9.7, which is interesting because his first 2 seasons in college, it was over 15. And so I think the scheme shift at Indiana definitely changed his role a bit in 2025. Omar Cooper is 22. He'll turn 23 in December. So why should the Bills consider drafting Omar Cooper out of Indiana? Well, I think he's a really polished player. There's a really likable skill set here. Body control and play strength are 2 things that really stand out to me. Ball skills are outstanding. He's very sure-handed. His career drop rate is 4.2%. You can tell he has confident hands and will snare that football away from his frame with extension. I think he's versatile. I think you could play him outside. You could play him in the slot. And he just does everything. He's a good yards after catch player. I love how he transitions from receiver to runner. He has a vertical component to what he does. He can win down the field. He's a really good route runner, which of course helps him get open in that intermediate area. And he loves to work at the middle of the field. I mean, this guy is fearless going over the middle. And so he can just win in a variety of ways from a variety of alignments and has a very just well-rounded skill set. He's a really polished player. So what concerns are there about forecasting Omar Cooper out of Indiana to the Buffalo Bills? Well, I think he has a modest wingspan. So if you're looking for a guy that can really extend their catch radius, I don't think this is him. His arm length was barely over 30 inches. I think he has to expand his route tree. I think he has a very likable route running profile. He just played in an RPO heavy scheme at Indiana that didn't ask him to run a route tree with a lot of branches to it. So he'll have to adjust to that and prove he can run a lot more routes than he showed in college. And then the one area of his game that I thought was underwhelming was run blocking. And obviously receivers, the main thing they do is catch passes, but the run game and blocking is important. And for a player with this overall profile, I was kind of surprised to see him not be more effective in the blocking game. And so I think he's probably a late first, early second round type player, which is where the Bills are picking. I don't know that this would be my favorite option for the Bills at 26. I think he's a darn good football player, and so you wouldn't be disappointed there. But I think he's probably a better candidate for other teams picking in that range, because I think the Bills are looking for more of a specific type of skill set. But he's a really good player. I expect him to be a really good NFL player, and just a really polished all-around skill set here with Omar Cooper. Let's talk about Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, 6'4", 206 pounds, 32 5/8 on the arm length, 9 3/4 on the hand size, a relative athleticism score of a 9.91 out of 10. He's really, really dynamic in terms of the athletic profile. In 2025 at Georgia State, he had 71 catches for 999 yards and 6 touchdowns. How annoying is that? 999 yards. You wish he just had like one more yard. His average depth of target was 12.6. He's 21 years old. He'll turn 22 in July. So why should the Bills consider drafting Ted Hurst out of Georgia State? Excuse me. He's a height, weight, speed guy, 6'4", 206, and can really fly. And he's got long strides that make the turf disappear. Excellent ball tracking skills. So it's one thing to be fast, but you got to be able to track the football over your shoulder down the field for that to matter. He can do it. I think he has a really good above the rim game in terms of high pointing the football and extending his catch radius. Got a big wingspan. And for a guy that's 6'4", I think his ability to sink his hips and work horizontal breaks is appealing. Now, he's got some work to do in that capacity, but the hip sink at his height is pretty enticing. So height, weight, speed, verticality, it's all there. What concerns are there about forecasting Ted Hurst out of Georgia State to the Bills? Well, I think it's functional strength. He's a guy that gets rerouted, 6'4", 206, a bit of a slender build. And whether that's early in the release, that's at the route break, it's at the catch point, he can get bumped, and adding more strength and that showing up on the field will matter. I think he's got to develop his release package, use more hands to clear contact. Right now, he's wants to reduce his surface. He wants to take jab steps, but you got to incorporate your hands a little bit more at the next level, and there'll be a jump up from Georgia State, obviously. And then I think for as exciting as the hip sink is to work the horizontal breaks, I think his speed through those turns is probably average at best. And so I do have some concern about him truly being a threat on the horizontal route plane. But linear routes, posts, goes, overs, I think he's going to be really dynamic and offer a really appealing down the field threat to an NFL offense. And so I think he'd be a great third-round target for the Bills if they obviously don't pick a receiver sooner than that. All right, so we talked about some speed guys. We got some big-time speed guys coming up here the rest of the way. So, folks, be sure to stick with me. The tournament is here, one of the best times of the year. Brackets, buzzer beaters, upsets. It's nonstop action from tip to final cutdown. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. Here's the best part. You get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. That means 10 chances to stay involved throughout the entire tournament. You can mix it up however you want. Game picks, futures, or even same-game parlays for bigger potential payouts. It's perfect for the tournament because every day there's something new, different matchups, new storylines, and more ways to get involved as the bracket unfolds. So visit FanDuel.com to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. All right, folks, let's continue our conversation previewing wide receiver prospects for the Bills in the 2026 NFL Draft. Let's now discuss Zachariah Branch out of Georgia. 5'9", 177 pounds, 29 3/8 on the arm length, 9-inch hands, relative athleticism score of a 9.11 out of 10. In 2025 for Georgia, he had 81 catches for 811 yards and 6 touchdowns. His average depth of target was just 3.6. And he's 22 years old and just turned 22 in March. So why should the Bills consider drafting Zachariah Branch out of Georgia? Well, he's explosive. He's electric with the ball in his hands. And while a lot of his plays have come in yards after catch, like get him the ball quick and let him create. There's been some really, really good moments as a vertical receiver when he's been given those opportunities. And he has punt return ability. And for a guy that's 177 pounds and 5'9", I think he plays big for a small guy, which is always important to me. If you're a big receiver, be big. If you're a small receiver, play big as well. Because if you're small and play small, that doesn't work in the NFL. And so this is a guy that I think doesn't know that he's 5'9", 177 pounds. He works the middle of the field. He's really, really assertive at the catch point. He will take on contact. And, there's a competitive toughness that you're going to love for 5'9", 177. He's also known for his leadership and work ethic. And I think that shows up where at the combine, he got 20 reps of 225 pounds on the bench press. You can't fake that. You get 20 reps of 225 at 177 pounds because you've been working your butt off for the last however many years in college. And I love that. And there's another guy coming up that got a bunch of reps that's small as well. And so, again, you can't hide that. You're either working or you're not. And my guy cranked out 20 reps at 225 at 177 pounds. That's freaking impressive. So what concerns are there about forecasting this player to the Bills? Well, I think he's primarily going to be a slot receiver, small catch radius. He's going to have to develop the route tree and develop more route pacing. They either asked him to go long and catch the ball over his shoulder, or they dumped it to him quick and asked him to create. There wasn't a whole lot of nuance to his overall role. It's, hey, you're an athlete. We're going to use you as an athlete, give you the ball, and go create. And so with that, I think there's an underdeveloped route running profile where, just rounding breaks. And obviously this guy has every tool to be a good separator, but hasn't learned the technique to be a really dynamic route runner. He's also a body catcher. When he did get chances to catch a ball, kind of in that intermediate range, I saw him trapping that thing against his frame, even when there's no traffic around him. And so I don't know that he's a natural hands catcher, but yards after catch, verticality, punt return, kick return, I think he can help your team and give you an X factor type player. So I think of him in that 3rd to 4th round range. Let's talk Brenen Thompson out of Mississippi State, 5'9", 164 pounds. 29 3/8 on the arm length, 9-inch hands. We don't have a relative athleticism score because he didn't do enough testing, but he did run the 40, and he ran the 40 in 4.26 seconds. So this guy is obviously fast. In 2025 for Mississippi State, 57 catches for 1,054 yards and 6 touchdowns, average depth of target of 18.4. So obviously this is very different where a lot of down the field opportunities. His average up the target is, I'm not going to do math here on the fly because that's a dangerous game to play, but Zachariah Branch was at 3.6 and Brenen Thompson was 18.4. That's significantly more. He's 22 years old. He turns 23 in July. So why should the Bills consider drafting Brenen Thompson out of Mississippi State? Well, he's explosive and he's a true field stretcher. Watch him play. I mean, this guy blows by coverage. If you're going to give him single coverage, good luck. Unless you have Max Harrison on your team, you don't have somebody that can run with this guy. And I think there was some really impressive over-the-shoulder tracking from Brenen Thompson where, I don't want to call him Willie Mays, but, I mean, there were times where, he was able to make a late adjustment to a pass and, go over his outside shoulder when he's expecting it on the inside. There were some really impressive ball tracking moments. And while I think there's more work to do in terms of the route running profile, the stop-start ability, the speed, the acceleration opens up a lot for him. And so because he's such a threat down the field, it opens up a lot of those routes underneath where he can snap off, break off a route and come back downhill. He can, break horizontally, break towards the sideline. And because they have to respect that vertical component, it leads to a lot of natural separation, even if he isn't an overly dynamic route runner. So what concerns are there about forecasting Brenen Thompson out of Mississippi State to the Bills? Well, I think he's undersized. He's 5'9", 164 pounds. And so he's unlikely to be a volume player. I think he has a restricted catch radius. Physicality is not on the menu here, where I think it's very different than Zachariah Branch, who I talked about. And I mean, obviously Branch is 13 pounds more, but there's a physical component to how he plays. And I think Brenen Thompson's truly a small guy that plays like he's small. And that's something to be mindful of. And what you don't love about Brenen Thompson is for this overall profile, he's not contributed at all in the return game, which you would love for that to be part of the overall profile to give him more value. And so I think if you want a true field stretcher that's going to give you a player that defenses have to respect on the field, it also opens some things up. There's some gadgety type things he can do. Sure. But, I think there's some limitations to this player as well. So I think of him kind of in that fourth to fifth round range. He'll probably get drafted a little higher because he ran a 4.26, but I don't know how much volume you're going to get out of a player like this. Very likable, but certainly some restrictions as well. All right, let's talk Deion Burks out of Oklahoma. 5'10", 180 pounds, 29 3/8 on the arm length, 9.5-inch hands, RAS score of a 9.09 out of 10. In 2025 at Oklahoma, 58 catches, 617 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Had an average depth of target of 8.6. He's 23. He'll turn 24 in January. So he just turned 23 in January 2026. So why should the Bills consider drafting Deion Burks out of Oklahoma? Well, it's the route running profile. He runs crisp routes. He's got loose hips, very deceptive. He's overall a very, very good route running profile that leads to separation. I found him to be very quarterback friendly. I love how he works back to the football. I love how he bends his routes to work back towards the quarterback, always square in terms of what he presents to the quarterback. I think he's a good yards after catch player, and he's taken his share of handoffs at Oklahoma. And so there's a multifaceted way that you can deploy him for your offense. Very impressive body control and footwork along the sideline. And he's a guy that's regarded for his work ethic. And just like I talked about with Zachariah Branch, the guy went out there and had 26 reps at 225 pounds. You do that at 180 pounds, you can't hide it. You've been working. You've been working, and that's very impressive to me. So what concerns are there about forecasting Deion Burks out of Oklahoma to the Bills? Well, he's one of those players that had elite time speed, but only good play speed. And so I don't know that the speed that he tested with at the combine really showed up consistently on tape at Oklahoma. The vertical profile is missing in college. For a guy with this type of profile, I'd expect him to have more opportunities to win down the field. It really didn't happen at Oklahoma. Also a guy that hasn't contributed in the return game, which you want to be part of his profile. I think he's very competitive, but I don't find him to be a very physical player. I think those pieces are missing. I think functional strength is missing from the profile here. And you also have to keep in mind that he was arrested in 2024 on misdemeanor counts of DUI, open container, and speeding. So I think of him kind of in that early day 3 window, 4th, 5th round range, likable player, but not without some concerns. All right, coming up next, I want to talk about a player that the Bills had a private workout with that also has big-time speed, and then another guy that injuries may just push him to the Bills, and they'll have a choice to make. So we'll talk about those guys here next, folks. Be sure to stick with me. What if sports were traded like markets? Now, you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood Prediction Markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood Prediction Markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the United States. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swaps firm. All right, folks, let's talk about a couple more players. This next one, Malik Benson out of Oregon, the Bills have had a private workout with, and he's an interesting guy. 6 foot, 189 pounds, 31 7/8 on the arm length, 8 5/8 on the hand size, so small hands. His relative athleticism score is a 6, but it's one of the most fascinating athletic testing profiles I've ever seen. He ran a 4.37 40. Okay, that's exceptional. But his jumps and his agilities were poor. It's like, what's going on here? And he has a background as a sprinter in high school, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think he knew how to run fast in a straight line. I don't know that he was prepared to do all the other stuff, but at least he did it. In 2025 for Oregon, Malik Benson had 43 catches for 719 yards and 6 touchdowns. his average depth of target was 13.8. He's 23 years old. He'll turn 24 in October. So why should the Bills consider drafting Malik Benson out of Oregon? Well, I think there's a lot of untapped potential here. Was a junior college prospect that, if I'm not mistaken, went to Alabama, then somewhere else, maybe Florida State, and then eventually got to Oregon. And Oregon's where he really started to produce, and he made some big plays. Check this out. He had 10 catches on 15 targets that were 20 yards or more down the field. He had 7 punt returns for 85 yards and a touchdown. That's over 18 yards per punt return. 5 of his 6 touchdowns went for over 40 yards. Like, there has been some big plays. And when you watch the film, you see flashy route running, you see flashy ball tracking, you see a tough guy. Like, I think there's some untapped potential here. Now, what concerns are there about forecasting Malik Benson out of Oregon to the Bills? Well, he is raw, and he turns 24 in October, so you don't love that combination. I do think he's got to get stronger. He's easily rerouted and beaten up by physical corners, so jams at the line of scrimmage, at the route break, at the catch point, with the ball in his hands. You don't see a guy that's functionally strong. I don't think he's near polished enough as a route runner. He can tip his routes. He drifts through some of his breaks. And I think for as exciting as the overall like athletic profile is here, he's got to be more decisive after the catch to maximize those opportunities with the ball in his hands. So I think he's a mid to late day 3 guy, but I think there's potential here. And for like the Bills, I think you can come in and be your punt returner and maybe your kick returner with Ray Davis, and then give you some X factor things on your offense. And I mean, for a mid to late day 3 pick, that's pretty valuable. But obviously there's some rawness here, and he's not necessarily a spring chicken in terms of age. All right, let's talk about one more player, and that's Jordyn Tyson out of Arizona State. And look, I know that you're probably thinking of Jordyn Tyson as a guy that will go earlier than the Bills pick at 26. And I said the same thing about Carnell Tate when we talked receivers in the first receiver episode, where even if the Bills aren't really in range to draft the player, I still want to talk about him, because I think there's value in listening to how I talk about these types of players and being able to compare that to some of the other guys that are in play for the Bills. And I'm not entirely convinced Jordyn Tyson's not going to be available at 26. I'd be surprised, but it's not like there's not some concerns here that can push him down the board. So let's talk about it. He's 6'2", 203 pounds, 30 1/4 inch arms, 9 1/8 inch hands. We won't get any athletic testing out of him. He's been battling a hamstring injury for a while. In 2025, 61 catches, 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Average depth of target of 11.7 yards. He's 21 and will turn 22 in August. So why should the Bills consider drafting Jordyn Tyson out of Arizona State? Well, it's route running. I think this guy might be the best route runner in the class. He's very deceptive. His stop-start ability is outstanding. He's a quick accelerator. And the full route tree is here. Like, he's run all the routes, and I love how he sets up his breaks and how deceptive he is. He's smooth. He's sudden. He's outstanding. And then I think those traits that make him a really good route runner show up in terms of yards after catch. And so that makes him pretty appealing. I think he's got exceptional ball skills, really, really good body control, a strong above the rim game, so he can extend that catch radius. He's very comfortable with chaos and traffic around him. He can win from the slot. He can win outside. I just think overall he's a very nuanced and detailed player. And he was coached by Hines Ward at Arizona State, and you can just tell. I felt this way about the Miami edge rusher, Akeem Mesidor, where I don't know if I profiled him or not on this podcast. I talked about him in the past. But there is just a really, really intriguing overall profile with him where there's just a technical refinement. And he was coached by Jason Taylor. And you could just tell with Jordyn Tyson, you could tell Hines Ward has had his hands all over this guy, and that technical refinement really shows up. So what concerns are there about forecasting Jordyn Tyson to the Bills? Well, it's injuries. That's the big thing on him. 2022, torn ACL, MCL, and PCL. Not great, right? We don't love that. That affected him into 2023. Then in 2024, he had a broken collarbone. 2025, he had a grade 2 hamstring injury that affected him all year to the point where he couldn't participate at the combine or his pro day. So for his college career, he missed 17 of 51 games. So injuries have just been an issue. I think he's probably average in terms of overall explosiveness and functional strength. And while the route running profile here is awesome, I think he freelances a lot. And I don't know that that's always going to work. Maybe with Josh Allen it would. But some systems that really require there to be true timing and precision and like, hey, you got to be here at this point in time and you have to do it a certain way. Some of those West Coast type schemes like Zach Taylor runs with the Bengals, I don't know that that's going to really work out because he freelances quite a bit. And again, that might be okay for some teams, but for others, it's not going to be okay. But I think of him as a first-round type receiver. The injury component might push him down to late first, maybe early second, which is where the Bills, are picking. I could certainly see him going a lot higher. If there was no injury concerns here, I think this is a slam dunk top 15 player. But there are injury concerns. And so it's just a matter of how comfortable you are. And, it's like, some of this is just unfortunate, right? Like you blew out your knee, you broke your collarbone. The hamstring's probably the most concerning thing. But it was very much lingering. It was very surprising that he wasn't able to test at the Combine or Pro Day. So, some buyer beware potentially there when it comes to the injury profile with Jordyn Tyson, but the skill set on tape is pretty appealing. All right, folks, there you have it. 7 more receivers covered. We'll do 7 more later in the week as we continue getting ready for this 2026 NFL draft. We've been working through positions of need, and we'll continue to do it here in the coming weeks as we get ready for the end of April, where the Bills have their next big opportunity to draft players and stock the cupboard full of cost control guys, hopefully that make an impact, infuse the roster with talent. It's meaningful. It's a big part of this team building process. So we'll make sure that we're ready for it here in the coming weeks. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks for being here. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.